Let's move on. We already talked about transport infrastructure, but we also need a strong investment in circular economy. It is a system that keeps products and materials in use as long as possible, through reuse, repair, refurbishment, and recycling. You have probably heard about the 4 Rs, but no, we are not going to sing a song about recycling. And it's not just about turning plastic bottles into plant pots. I am talking about a more ambitious concept. The various materials in your cell phone, computer, and other devices can be recycled to reduce the need for further mining of critical materials. Recycling rates of these are far below what is already technically possible. For some critical materials like gallium or silicon, the EU's recycling rate is near zero. But recycling is just a part of the idea. The circular economy also implies maximizing use and reducing our consumption. But we need the conditions to make that possible. We all know that companies produce electronic devices with shorter lifespans or that are difficult to repair, and governments should address this too. Through appropriate legislation, targeted economic investments, and stronger corporate oversight. On this topic, the German federal government, under the Traffic Light Coalition, published a national circular economy strategy. It outlines the government goals and measures for promoting a circular economy. The aim is to prevent waste generation altogether through a smarter product design that ensures longer lifespans, allows for repairs, and enables the recovery and recycling of resources from old devices. It sets out many measures to that end, but there are still many open questions. Which rules have been created and how obligated are companies to comply with them? How can companies maintain their competitiveness in the global market? And how can we mobilize the financial resources and innovation needed to make this possible? And sadly, sometimes it just feels like it's not a priority. We have, on the contrary, here proposals to continue relying on fossil fuels or to relax oversight of companies. In our ecological crisis, that is unacceptable, so we need to step up and push for a real change. Legislative initiatives are already underway or have been introduced to make energy transitions fairer. Look at some on the screen. Some recent ones and ones you should watch closely to see if they are well designed, implemented, or not misused include the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Adopted in July 2024, it requires companies to identify human rights and environmental risk in their supply chain, take steps to prevent harm, and report on their actions. EU countries must implement it by 2027. Lieferkettengesetz, or in English, the German Supply Chain Act. It requires companies to identify and address human rights impacts across their supply chain, like forced labor, child labor, and land grabbing. However, there are no proposals to reduce its scope, so stay alert. The Critical Raw Materials Act proposed by the EU aims to secure supply chains and reduce dependence on single suppliers. It was therefore focused mainly on sovereignty and security issues from the EU perspective, and not so much on sustainability and globally fair mining standards. But mining as usual can be fully sustainable, and stricter social and environmental standards are needed. Also, partnerships with resource-rich countries like the ones in Latin America must promote local development, technology transfer, and fair practices, not just supply chain. They also need to benefit from the energy transition as we learned, so also stay alert. We have talked about the federal level, but this should happen locally too. To analyze what can be done locally in Baden-Württemberg, we will be speaking with Felix Roll. He is a policy officer for economy and human rights and a thematic promoter for fair and sustainable economic practices at the organization Werkstatt Ökonomie, which is committed to promote economic, social, and ecological justice worldwide. Recently, Werkstatt Ökonomie published a study on the extraction of critical minerals in different countries for industrial use in Baden-Württemberg. He will tell us more about this report, explain what is happening in Baden-Württemberg regarding these critical minerals, and discuss what can be done to make the extraction more just.
We looked at 5 raw materials which are especially important for the state of Baden-Württemberg because they are very important for the industry here and are used and imported a lot, and because they are they have a lot of risks in their supply chains. So we looked at tungsten, bauxite, lithium, cobalt, and copper. We talked with people from the countries where these 5 raw materials are coming from, Obviously, there are different countries they are coming from, but we spoke with people from the Democratic Republic of Congo, from Indonesia, from Peru, also from Zimbabwe, and from Mongolia. I think we have very interesting interviews in the study about the conditions there, where they get all these raw materials. Yeah, it is very important because the economic prosperity in Baden-Württemberg depends very much on raw materials. We consume twice as many raw materials here as the national average in Germany. The reason is that the state has a strong industrial sector, for example, the automotive sector here in Baden-Württemberg, and we will need even more raw materials in the future for the energy transition and the digitalization and so on. And we import all of our raw materials as we do not mine them here. And I think, as we all know, the extraction of these raw materials takes place especially in the global south. And there the extraction is leading to devastating environmental destruction, the displacement of local populations, human rights violations such as child and forced labor, and in many regions. I think we should all be concerned because our prosperity and our technologies, like cars, rely on the exploitation of raw materials that are mainly extracted under terrible conditions, and I'm sure nobody wants that. I think the first step must be for the state of Baden-Württemberg to become aware of its responsibility, but also its possibilities that they have here in the state of Baden-Württemberg. We will need the political will and also the pressure to change something here in the state as well. The raw material transition must include reducing the raw material consumption, but also complying with environmental and social standards, and also promoting transparency along the global value chains. Therefore, different actions are needed, and also different actors are needed. I will give you two examples. The state government should implement procurement law with mandatory social criteria, and companies must establish a strong dialogue with mining regions and ensure transparency in their supply chains as well. I think the most important thing would be to implement a sustainable procurement, meaning that products like IT equipment or cars that have a lot of raw materials are sourced under fair conditions. And they can also promote a local circular economy, for example, by supporting repair cafes and other things. Yeah, I think at the end it's a political question, and that's why we need political pressure or pressure on politicians to change something. Yeah, as I already said, we published the study on the responsibility of the state of Baden-Württemberg, and people can find the full study on the website of Werkstatt Ökonomie. And we also have a network that campaigns for raw material transition here in Baden-Württemberg. So you can contact me or my colleagues if you want to work with us.
Finally, at the international level, a binding treaty on business and human rights in the United Nations has been in the works for over 10 years. It is time to push for agreement and approval, and we must keep a close eye on its progress. The changes needed in how companies operate and how economies function aren't the responsibility of a single country. In our globalized world, the things we use are made with companies from one country, produced in another, and sold somewhere else. The actions to make the change of our energy system fair require international cooperation and new ways of interacting with other countries, like those in Latin America. We need international dialogues based on equality, leaving behind the idea of powerful countries and weak ones. The energy transition must be fair for all societies. We have heard a lot about this big conference, but when the countries that consume the most, which are usually the ones making the decisions, do not want to change, countries like those in Latin America can be overlooked. Germany can change, and historically it has demonstrated its ability to make significant and positive impacts. We need the government to take on this role and see their peers in Latin America as equals, listening to the needs of their territories and establishing agreements to also develop technologies in these countries that support the energy transitions there. And that brings us to the end of our series. We agree that we need to move away from fossil fuels, but also that the shift to clean energy must be done the right way. Since this transition relies on critical materials, many of which come from Latin America, it is a global responsibility to ensure that local communities, indigenous people, and women in the region see that this transition is fair for them too. And as a little bit of cliché, your individual actions also matter, but not in the sense of restricting yourself while companies keep polluting and government look the other way around, but in being conscious, staying alert, and demanding that things are done right. As I said in the first video, everything we use always comes from somewhere, and we can always do something to make it right. Goodbye!